Okay, 40K players, I've been building up my 40K archive over on my blog, looking at fundamental 40K tactics, the type of tactics when you're starting out in 40K, Warhammer 40,000, regardless of the army, regardless of where your collection is, solid fundamentals that you can apply with the idea of cutting down this learning curve. With 40K and with any wargaming system, you do have to pay your dues. You're going to have to get in there on the table, roll the dice, have some wins, have some losses, and begin to assemble these tactics and your player personality and the type of armies and lists you want to play. But if I can cut that down, right? If we say, look, there's 10 games it's going to take you, and I'm just making that up, 10 games for the learning curve. If I can get it down to 9, 5, 4, then that's worth the price of admission. And even better, if you can take some of my ideas and utilize them and make them better, adapt them to your local meta, adapt them to your play style, then that works out even more better for our community. Because we're going to kind of communicate, build some synergy, get that stuff going, elevate, and evolve. And that's one of the reasons why YouTube has been so amazing for me over the years with helping me to become a better player. Watching your stuff, I appreciate your comments, giving me some ideas to think about. It absolutely has increased my game. So I have those over on my blog. The link to that is underneath this video. Now I'm pushing a little bit of that back to YouTube. So the next couple of days across all the wargaming systems that I enjoy, Wings of Glory, World War I, Battletech, Warhammer 40K, of course. We've got some Chain of Command stuff. I'm going to start populating that and building up the archives. So I want to talk about intention of movement and the volume, this idea of volume of dice and breaking it up in 40K. So the rule system of 40K is kind of simplistic in that if you throw enough dice at something, it will go away. The question is being able to generate that amount of dice. So if I have a big group of cultists running forward, Chaos cultists, because we've been talking about my Berserkers of Scalathrax, Chaos Army and all of its cornate glory and martial honor. If you have one Space Marine squad, I'll go after that. You'll shoot me first. If I can't get the jump on you, I'll take some crazy losses, but I'll get to return fire. And if I get lucky on the dice and I take out a bunch of your attack Marines, that's pretty good. It's worth the points. It's worth the disruption factor. But as soon as you throw on two groups of tacticals, two groups of Space Marines, then there's too much dice, right? You're going to be able to shoot both. You're going to be able to generate dice, picking up the dice, physically picking up the dice you need to hit, and rolling them, you're going to wipe me out. So I want to divide your dice pool, right? I want to, there's like that scene from Aliens where you've got the motion tracker and you've got movement, and they're in the hive. If you've been following my channel for any amount of time, you know I'm a massive Aliens fanboy. The only thing that possibly competes with 40K would be Battletech, in truth, but Aliens versus Predator, all that type of stuff. I love it. But this motion tracker is going off. There's movement all around, and you don't know what to lock in on, right? You don't know where they're coming. That's that moment on there. So I want to divide your dice pool. How do we do that? Or more importantly, how do we prevent our opponent from having this dice? So let's look at my Berserkers of Scalathrax Chaos Army. I've been using this as a number of examples, especially because on my blog you can find links to it where it goes into a lot more detail. And it's a great illustration of these ideas and these concepts in play. But again, this applies to any army. You're going to kind of go through the checklist here and apply your units and what you're playing, and we're going to kind of push and make that happen and see what we can do on there. So if I take my Land Raider with my Terminators inside, and I roll that down the field, down the table, which I'm going to do, because that's why they're in the list. Also up in the archive is active versus passive. Warhammer 40,000, active versus passive. It's in the playlist, Warhammer 40K. That's 40K Tactics 101. That podcast alone is going to take you very, very far in your 40K thinking. And I say that, it's just my terminology that I've utilized to communicate this. But this was something after about a year and a half of playing 40K where I would look and see, okay, these top players, these players that win versus players that lose, players that are much more sophisticated than I am, at the time. We're going back a couple of years. Looking at them play, I'm like, okay, well, they're both playing similar lists because in tournament play, the Tier 1 codexes make it to the top tables, and they're kind of there. So they're playing the same lists. They're playing the same units. They understand the rules. It's the same mission. Why did one player win over the other? And we're discounting like the swingy dice or someone got a good round, because of the flawed D6 system in there. Looking, why? And it took a while looking at that. Active versus passive is the reason why. So we want to kind of definitely, I want to push that out and get that to you. It's already uploaded in the archive. So if I take that Land Raider and I move it forward, it's obvious what I'm doing. You're going to calculate, okay, he's going to be in there next turn, or I'm going to start shooting at it, and you're going to look and say, well, what do I need to stop that Land Raider? Okay, here's what's in my list. I'm going to shoot everything at it, or you're going to kind of wall things off with a screening unit or bubble wrap your stuff. It's obvious. Now, in my Berserkers of Scalathrax list, there's some units that I want them. Obviously, if you drop into my deployment zone, I'm going to nuke you. I'm going to hit you with stuff, right? I'm going to swamp you with stuff. I have to. I can't have you running around in there. But there's certain units in my list that, while they're deployed on the table, they're not going to become important until mid-game, following my plan as a player. So essentially, they can just kind of hang out there. What if I start moving them? That's where we want to hide multiple targets incoming. So my Vindicator, my Chosen, other Terminator group, my Cornate Berserkers, they're mid-game. What if I started to advance them with the Land Raider? What if I started to move them from one side of the table to the other side of the table? Or they deploy in the middle because then I have the biggest threat bubble. They start moving over to my left flank. You have to account for that movement. Even though in my mind I know, look, I don't need these guys till mid-game. But now you're going to start to divide your dice, because now you're going to start to say, well, look, I want to stop that Land Raider, but in order to stop that Land Raider reliably, I've got the units in the middle, but I'm going to have to pull off some of my heavy weapons stuff or high volume dice stuff and kind of get it into a better position. But now you're looking and saying, well, look, I got like 40 Zerkers coming up on the flank. I got to reinforce there. So maybe you do keep that high volume dice unit where it is to shoot them into my Zerkers when they come up. Thing is, my Zerkers aren't going to be walking up there. So we always want to move multiple units. I call this running around in place. Back in the days of 4th edition, when you had to move to get a cover save with Eldar, you could essentially stay in place and just say you're going to move in a circle. So you could kind of move in a circle and end in the same place you started and get that cover save on there. Not quite that, but the same idea, running in place. Move over 5 or 6 inches. Move over 3 inches. Move up. Another thing you could do is make your primary threat bigger than it is. Move up that Land Raider. Move up 2 or 3 Razorbacks. Then pause. Turn 2. Send the Razorbacks back. Or send them somewhere else, right? But get multiple units moving every single turn, even if they're not going to engage, even if you don't have an immediate tactica plan for them, because that is going to force your opponent to divide the dice. That is going to force your opponent, and they might guess correctly. They might say, look, I know what's going on. I know Fritz. I played him before. Or I've listened to his podcasts. Or it's just so obvious what this guy's doing. So I'm just going to go for the Land Raider. But maybe not. And more often than not, it will give you an opportunity. So whatever army you're playing, that's the second part that I would recommend looking. Fundamental 40K tactics. Fundamental number 1 tactic, active versus passive players. More to come.